Lindsay, my fluval queen, welcome back.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
I was shocked at the response to our fluval stratum episode. People were so curious, they were so excited to nerd out. And so I knew I had to have you back. And I'm personally very excited about this because I have some corms that I am interested in reviving. I've never done this method before. I've seen it on Instagram before. So I'm so excited to nerd out on this extremely specific topic. So let's zoom out before we dive into corms. For those who didn't listen to your fluval conversation, can you just give a brief introduction to who you are in your book and your expertise?
Sure. So, my name's Lindsay Sisti of All the Plant Babies. So that's my brand, and it just started off as an Instagram screen name back in the day, but it has evolved into a full brand and website and where people can purchase plants as well as an Etsy shop. And now I am an author. So I did publish a book called The Ultimate Guide to Houseplant Propagation in December of last year. And now I help people propagate plants all around the world. And I'm very happy to be on this podcast today because I can further discuss one of my favorite topics, which is propagating, specifically alocasia. So alocasias and anthuriums are my two very specific niches. I breed both alocasias and anthuriums. That's my focus in life, both my hobby and my job, which is a blessing and a curse to be able to do what you love for a living, because sometimes those boundaries are a little too blurry, because
Totally.
sometimes it feels like I'm working all the time and sometimes it feels like I'm playing all the time, but I'm doing a little bit of both. But I'm always creating or working towards creating new alocasia and new anthurium species, and a large part of that is propagating these plants from their little storage organs, which are, in the case of alocasia, corms. So I do a lot of corm propagation, and that's what we'll be discussing today.
Yeah, so before we dive into the nitty gritty, let's zoom out and just talk about Alocasia in general. Tell me a little bit about this genus and also where they live and the structure, the anatomy of it, so we can dive into the corm and what it is.
Awesome, yeah. So alocasias primarily found in Southeast Asia and the Philippines. There's a lot of Philippine species, a lot of Indonesian species. So in that part of the world, you're going to find them in the Borneo rainforests. That's where they're native to. Not a lot of people are living or traveling to those on a regular basis, but from America. But if you're lucky enough to go on vacation to one of those beautiful, beautiful countries, or have family members in one of those beautiful countries, you will be lucky enough to see alocasia in the wild. And there are just thousands and upon thousands of different species and variations of the species, and thousands to be yet discovered. And so every day there are new species of alocasia being discovered in these rainforests, and many of them are unfortunately at risk because of deforestation and, of course, as we know, global warming. So it is so important that we are documenting these species and trying to preserve the wildlife and the rainforests in these areas, as well as protecting them from poachers. So it is a very difficult balance to try to preserve and collect and document these rare species of alocasia that are near and dear to our hearts as collectors and people who study these species of alocasia.
Why do you think they're so popular?
Gosh, as houseplants, it's funny. For me personally, I have always been drawn to alocasia as a plant as a little girl. It was perhaps the first houseplant I was really drawn to as a kid because they reminded me of, they're called elephant ears. And so I think just being drawn to them as something that looks like an animal's ear or a triangle shape, and they're shiny and they have these broad, beautiful veins, is just appealing to the human eye. And of course, the most common, that was back in the 90s, the most common species is the Alocasia poly. you'll see that the beautiful dark green leaves with the broad light green veins and that triangle shape, almost looks like a slice of pizza,
Hmm.
and or an elephant ear. It's just a beautiful plant, and so it's very natural to be drawn to it. And so I think that's something that people just find appealing visually. They make beautiful house plants because they are tolerant to ambient levels of humidity. You can grow them even if you don't live in super humid southern Florida. You know, if you live in Chicago like me, you can grow them in your living room, which
Hmm.
is amazing. Well, a lot of species, not all species of alocasia, but something like Alocasia poly, you can. So they're very appealing. What is not so appealing, which people find very quickly, is that they are very prone to spider mites as a species. So a lot of people will get an Alocasia poly from Home Depot, per se, and because it's very common to find them there. And soon you'll get webbing and yellowing leaves, and into the trash it goes. So that's a common story of the alocasia. They're also easy to overwater or underwater. They are not very drought tolerant like its snake plant counterpart, which you'll see also sold in the next plant aisle in the hardware store. So they are extremely attractive. There's no doubt about that. But they also have its flaws. They
Yeah,
also
they're
have their
not they're
flaws.
not the hardiest. But I will
No,
say
they're not.
too, they are resilient. We
Yes.
had an alocasia poly. My mom had one for many years, and like that thing would fall off the table and all the leaves would snap off and all the leaves would
Yes.
grow back, and it kind of just worked. So let's talk
Yeah.
about the anatomy of alocasia. What's a corm versus what's a root?
Okay, that is a great question. So, and it's a nuanced question because depends how scientific you want to get with it. But let's start with the basic anatomy for beginner plant enthusiasts that are listening to this, and just exactly like you said, like what's the difference between a corm, a stem, a root? So you're looking at your plant, you know what the leaves are, hopefully. The leaves are the beautiful shiny part up top that you're attracted to, that have the veins on them. That's the part that photosynthesizes, the part that attracts the sun and converts that into energy and sugars. So that's the leaves. And then you have the stem, which is the central axis, the part that holds the leaves up. It's kind of like the transportation highway that all the water and nutrients from the ground goes up to bring to the leaves. So you think of that stem as the highway, if you will, that transports all the nutrients from the ground. So we're working our way down here from the leaves. So then on an alocasia, the stem meets the dirt, and you're going to have these underground stems. So everything underground is still considered a stem, but what it turns into, the name for it is then called a rhizome. So the stem then starts looking kind of a little, I don't want to say ugly, but it's not as beautiful and smooth as the
Mhm.
above ground stem. It has rings around it, it's brown, and I guess it's still beautiful in its own way. But that's called the rhizome. It's the underground part of the stem, and it continues underground to store nutrients, mainly in the form of starches, and helps the plant if, in the case like your family's plant that lost its leaves,
Mhm.
or if it wants to go dormant, the plant, if it's terrible conditions above ground, all the leaves can die back. And any alocasia lover listening to this has probably had an alocasia that has died back, meaning all the leaves wither away, and you just have kind of a pot of dirt. Well, what's left is that rhizome, that underground stem, and it's kind of holding down the fort like an underground bunker, and it's able to then, if the conditions are right, resprout leaves again. So the rhizome is like an underground survival bunker.
Okay.
It's the underground stem. And out from the rhizome are the white roots.
Mhm.
And well, they should be white.
Mhm.
They're not always white. When they're not white, that is a problem. And that's a very important point I'd like to make is in the alocasia enthusiast group, which is actually, it is the largest plant Facebook group of all the plant Facebook
Oh,
groups.
wow.
Yeah, it's actually pretty amazing. It just goes to show how popular alocasias as a genus has become. So yeah, alocasia is even more
Yeah.
popular than monsteras and philodendrons. So if you do have alocasia questions, I do encourage you to go onto Alocasia Enthusiasts Facebook group. So many great admins on there answering questions. So in that group, people are always asking questions. What's wrong with my alocasia? Why doesn't it look okay? Why is it struggling? Well, the number one thing I always tell people is look at the roots. Well, first look at the leaves to see if there's pests with a microscope or a handheld magnifying glass or a jeweler's loupe. But beyond that, gently lift your plant out of the soil or tip the pot over and look at the roots. The roots will tell you everything. If they're white and firm, then your plant is still healthy. And then if it's that, there's probably a pest issue. If the roots are brown or mushy or black, or maybe they're not even existent. Sometimes it's gotten so bad where there's no more roots. They've decayed completely. Well, then your plant has probably gone into dormancy already. At that point, there's and that's a whole nother topic of what to do from there. I talk about that more like in my book, or you can ask a plant expert of what to do at that point. But the roots should be white. I don't want to go on a whole nother tangent, but that's the case with the roots. Anatomy-wise, from the rhizome on an alocasia, in addition to roots, you're going to have these little stems coming out of the rhizome. And they look like thin little spindles. That's the best way to describe it, like little stems. And the term that people give them or botanists give them are stolons. So they're like little stems. And on the end of these stems typically are these round little nuggets. And those little nuggets, and this is on most species of alocasia. On some alocasia, the nuggets are attached directly to the rhizome. So it's different on different alocasia, but on most you're going to have the stolon, and then you're going to have the round little nuggets. They kind of look like Hershey Kisses, but more like a teardrop. And those, if they're big and round, are called, most of the time, corms.
Okay. That's what we're talking about today.
And that's what we're talking about today. Maria's like, oh my God, thank goodness Lindsay gets to the point.
No, not at all. It's interesting because there are a lot of different structures, like just talking
Yes.
about the fact that there's rhizomes, roots, stolons, and
Yes.
corms. There's a lot going on under the soil, but I think
Really,
you
there
brought
is.
up a couple things I just wanted to touch on. Number one, just because your alocasia's lost all of its leaves doesn't mean it's dead, right?
No.
I've brought many back from that state. And it is, alocasia do experience dormancy indoors in a way that a
Yes.
lot of other plants don't.
Yes.
And, most of our houseplants, when we think about propagating, we think about taking, stem and node cuttings from our pothos and our philodendrons and stuff. And this really is a very different kind of division process. So,
Totally different.
do you ever see the corms above the soil, or are the corms always under the soil?
That's a great question. Yes, they do. So that is a funny thing that happens with alocasia. So in the wild, the way they grow is in these tropical rainforests where leaves are constantly falling off the trees, and that's called leaf litter. So these wet leaves and sticks are constantly falling down, and so the leaf litter is always rising around the alocasias that are growing on the forest floor. And so naturally the alocasias growing these corms on the stolon, and so if it was in its natural environment, it would be covered over time by rising leaf litter. So the corm, if it would grow higher and higher and higher, would be covered by this rising leaf litter. But in your pot, in your house, nothing's rising. I mean, if anything, you're watering your plant each week.
The soil's getting lower and lower. Yeah.
It's going lower and lower.
Yeah.
So every once in a while, especially if you're not refilling your pot with extra soil and it's been sitting there for a long time, you'll see, and this happens in the Alocasia Facebook group, someone will post like, what the heck heck is going on? You'll see a stolon pop up out of the soil and a corm will just be like sticking up in the air. And people say like, what am I supposed to do with this thing? And you can, same thing as an underground corm, you can just kind of pop it off and propagate it.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's talk about that. So the best way to propagate alocasia is via this corm, or the only way to propagate alocasia is via this corm method.
No, it's not the only way, but it is for sure the easiest way.
Okay.
You can actually cut up the rhizome, the underground stem, and propagate it that way, but the chance of it rotting is much, much higher. So the success rate is not that great. I mean, I've done it plenty of times. The more experienced you are with propagation, of course, the higher your success rate, but it's not as, I mean, corms are almost, I shouldn't say foolproof, but I mean, if you know what you're doing, the success rate will be like triple. Yeah.
So I have an alocasia. I've never done this corm propagation method before. Walk me through. What do I do? How do I identify them? Well, maybe the first question is, when is the right time to go corm hunting?
That's awesome. One of my friends calls it spelunking.
Yeah.
So, well, one more thing about the anatomy. It would be a total miss if I didn't mention this because some listeners are probably thinking this in their head. And that is, they're probably thinking, well, what about the tiny little things that look like corms on the end of the stolons? And alocasias produce these stolons, and on the end of them, about half of the time, there are corms, and on the other half of the time, there are these small things that look almost like corms, but they're very thin. Okay. They look like extremely underdeveloped corms.
Wimpy corms.
Wimpy corms. Very sad corms. And there's a technical name for these, but again, like all of these technical, even like the name corm itself, they're not formally documented. Even the word corm is nuanced and debated in the botanical world. Like the name corm itself is disagreed upon between botanists and horticulturists. Some think it should be called tubercules. Some think it should be called cormules. Some people say, it's very heated. In other parts of the world, they say it's just bulbs. So corms is a very big U.S. term to call it. So got it. Even that's debated. But these tiny little flat things, if you see them, I think wimpy corms actually should be the new botanical term. So let's make that a thing. Let's make that a thing. Wimpy corms is, I could see the botanists totally agreeing with us now. The wimpy corms, they are terminal cormules is kind of the agreed upon botanical name for them. And can they be propagated? Yes, they can be, but usually nothing comes of it. What I think is happening personally is, like I told you, that leaf litter is rising in the wild. And I think what would happen in the wild is that they would develop into corms, since because you usually find them towards the surface, these wimpy corms, and it just, in your pot there's no rising leaf litter, so it's like kind of like a sad attempt of making corms that your plant is doing up top. So back to your question, I just wanted to mention that, but you had asked when's the right time to go corm spelunking. Okay, so this is another hotly debated topic. I saw someone post on Facebook the other day. He said, I just want to tell everyone that I think it's terrible or a bad idea for anyone to take your alocasia out of the pot to take corms off, because it's going to make your whole plant go dormant. And you should never do that. Never take corms off your alocasia, because you're going to destroy your plant. And so everyone fired back, you're wrong. I've done it many times safely. Well, the answer is it depends, right? So I've had an alocasia go dormant on me after I have ceremoniously taken the whole thing out of its pot, plucked off like 20, this was a very mature alocasia. It had like 20 or 30 big, fat, beautiful corms. It hadn't been disturbed in its pot for like 2 years. I took it out. I took all the corms off. This alocasia got so pissed at me. I mean, it was just like, you're picking off my nipples. I mean, it must have been like, it must have felt like that. I don't know. It was like mad. And I put it back in the pot, and it was sad. It all drooped. It was just droopy, droopy, droopy. And I mean, it tried to go somewhat dormant. I had to cut off a bunch of leaves. It ended up coming back after I chopped off like 70% of its leaves. It was not the same after that. And it's still alive, but it's very sad. Needless to say, the corms grew back beautifully. The corms have grown back into more beautiful plants than the original mother was. So it was fun. And I ended up with like so many more plants than I could even handle. I've been giving away these silver dragon plants for like 6 months now. So yes, I've seen it happen. But that plant was also in soil, in an aeroid mix. With my plants in pon, I have not seen that happen.
Okay.
So all that being said, I think it all depends. I think how much and how stressed your plant is after taking it out of its pot to take corms off depends on how many corms you're taking off. Mm-hmm. I mean, in my case, I took off like 20, 30 corms.
Right.
I mean, it was
That's
ton.
a big shock. Yeah, that's a big shock to the plant.
I really shocked this plant that hadn't been touched in like 2 years. Then I put it back in soil, which is not getting consistent moisture, like a situation in semi-hydro in Lechuza Pond. It is a consistent moisture situation. Semi-hydro, the moisture levels are always the same. And alocasias really thrive as a species in semi-hydro because of this, because they don't do as well as other plants with watering then drying out, watering then drying out. They really love the same moisture levels. So when I take my plants out of pon or lift them out of their pon pots, pluck a bunch of corms off and then put them back in pon, it's like they don't notice anything has happened.
Right.
So I notice there's more of resiliency there. So I think also the time of year that you do it. If you're doing it when it's warm in the spring, in the summer, or if you live in a warmer climate, your plant isn't going to notice as much. If you're in the middle of winter in Chicago and you take a plant in soil and pluck off 20 corms, your plant's going to be pissed. So you have to judge where you live, how cold it is, and what substrate you're using. It all depends. But otherwise, I say go for it. I am always like pro fiddling with your plants.
Try it and whatever. I mean, even though your first alocasia didn't do well, it sounds like you got 20 really robust
At least 20. It had to be, I'm downplaying it. It was so many corms. I was like the old lady who lived in a shoe. I had so many corms, I didn't know what to do. Like
you didn't know what to do.
I couldn't even sell the corms. It was stupid. It was stupid how many corms I had. Like my friends were like, no, we don't want these corms. Like, and I didn't want to throw them away. So like it wasn't an issue. Like the worst thing that happens is you have too many corms.
You have too many corms. Put them all in a pot. Let's speak, let's center this episode around a non-commercial grower, a hobbyist who wants to try this for the first time. They're not going to take 1,000,000 corms. They're going to, do a reasonable amount of corms. So what is the process for doing this? So I have my alocasia. What's step one?
Okay. So you have your alocasia, say poly or dragon scale in a small pot. First of all, make sure that it's mature enough. Well, you ideally want to do it in a more mature plant. If this is a baby plant, like a tiny little plant in a 2-inch pot, and you just bought this plant and it's the size of the palm of your hand, it probably hasn't produced any corms yet.
Grow it out.
It's just not what people say corming size. Yeah, it has to be, just like any plant or like chicken, has to be mature enough to lay eggs. I always call these like I call my alocasias my chickens because for my business, I always, to justify buying new ones to my husband, I say like, well, it's like buying another chicken because they're going to lay golden eggs. It's just what I say to justify it. It's not really the truth because I don't make much money on them, but I just want more plants. Seriously, it's the same concept, is that you want to make sure it's mature enough to lay these little golden nuggets for you. So make sure it has, 4 leaves, 5 leaves. But even if it doesn't and you just want to peek, it never hurts to gently tip the plant on its side. squeeze the pot a little bit instead of just ripping it out of the pot. It's nice if you're able to squeeze. If it's a hard pot, tap the bottom. If it feels like it's really stuck in the pot, like you're using a terracotta pot or a concrete pot, one trick of the trade is to use a butter knife and just slide it around or in and out around the edges between the soil and the edges of the pot so that the plant will slide right out. This way, you are not yanking the stem and ripping the roots. Because that's what people are afraid of doing, is disturbing. You'll see that a lot online, disturbing your plant's roots. Well, you're not disturbing anything if you're able to take it out without ripping your roots. So and if, by the way, with that being said, if you rip some of your plant's roots, that is okay. I rip my Alocasia's roots every time I take it out of the pot, and it's totally fine.
Yeah, they're meant to be broken. Roots get broken in nature all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
By animals, by insects, and that will trigger the plant to grow more roots. So do not worry. If you have a phobia of it, just do it on purpose. It's like, just take a deep breath and rip some roots as part of your exposure therapy. We need some plant exposure therapy because people do have these real big hang-ups, and ripping roots is one of them. One of the biggest I find with new plant parents. They're very afraid of ripping roots. So go ahead, just a little bit, rip a root. Okay, and then take your plant out. The corms, usually they'll be inside the root ball, like in the center is where you'll find the corms, the little nuggets. So you'll just want to reach in and pull them out. You don't need scissors. Just use your fingers and just
Is it like a snap? It's a firm snap?
It's a snap. It's a snap. And you don't have to worry about where you're snapping the stolon because you're snapping. Imagine, I always like to call them little Hershey kisses, but imagine you're snapping the little Hershey kiss right off the stem. That you could snap the stem all the way at the base of the stem, or you could just pull it like you're pulling a raspberry off of a bush. So doesn't matter where, and it's okay if it has a little piece of stem on it. It's okay if there's no stem on it.
Okay.
You're just pulling it off, and that's not going to hurt the plant either. It is not going to hurt the plant. And if you want to use a scissor, you can use a scissor. Just make sure your hands are clean. I like to, before I should mention this too, I like to spray my hands with 70% rubbing alcohol or just wash my hands with soap and water before I do this. Just in case, I don't know, I have some pathogen on my hand that introduces mold or bacteria into my plants. Soil has so much bacteria in it anyway, it's probably fine, but you just never know. And especially when using like Lechuzapon, I try to keep everything super sterile. So it's never a bad idea just to have your hands clean before doing this. So we're at the point. We've plucked our corms, and that's it. Take all the corms that you see that seem big enough. And what I mean by big enough is I hate to use terms like that because for every Alocasia species, big enough, and I'm using air quotes right now for those that are not watching me, big enough is different. Each species is different. I remember the first time I saw a corm on my Alocasia infernalis, which if anyone who's never grown one before, it's that really dark purple plum-like species. And many of you probably have never seen it because it's so hard to grow. The minute you buy one, it dies on you. Alocasia infernalis corms are the size of mini chocolate chips. And so I had this plant for 2 years. I don't know how I kept it alive for 2 years. It was my greatest feat, my greatest horticultural feat. But I'm like, this plant won't produce a corm for me. I couldn't believe it wouldn't. Turns out it was producing corms.
And
I just didn't.
So tiny.
They were the size of mini chocolate chips, and they weren't on stolons. They were attached to the rhizome, like mini chocolate chips on the rhizome. And I felt like such an idiot. This was, 4 or 5 years ago. And finally I realized when I plucked these tiny, and they were really in the rhizome. It was bizarre. And so when I plucked them out one day, I said, oh my gosh, this is I had no idea. And I planted them. They grew new Alocasia infernalises. So you have to understand what your species looks like. And the only way to know is either, now everything's on AI, so you could probably just ask ChatGPT or Google it, what the corms look like, but for your Alocasia. But in general, a corm that's a healthy size for most species will probably be the size of the average adult's thumbnail. Is like a nice healthy corm. For bigger alocasia species, it's even bigger. If your corm looks super tiny compared to all the rest of the corms on your plant, you may want to leave it on there to cook a little longer, because the longer your corm is on the mother plant, the bigger and bigger it will get. And the bigger it gets, the more mature it will be and the more easy and readily it will sprout for you.
Okay.
So it's just like anything else on a plant. It's nice to kind of let it grow longer while it's attached to the mom. But again, everything I say, I always tell people, take with a grain of salt, experiment, do it your way. You can take a tiny corm off, it might just grow into a smaller plant.
Right.
So or it might take a little longer to sprout. I am kind of impatient. I take everything off usually.
Right. Now, when you're taking it off, does it have to callus over, or are you immediately putting it into media?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. So this is so different from, letting, say, a propagation from, say, a succulent callus over. When you are not letting anything callus over, in fact, you're almost doing the opposite. This is also another debate, but I personally, I'm peeling it. Mm-hmm. So the outer layer of a corm will have a shell, almost like an onion, like an onion bulb. And I will take, and this is not an original idea of mine by any means. I read this in an article from like 1984, 1986, by a man by the name of, I believe his name was Jim Georges. It was published by the Aeroid Society. And what he said was to take a plant tag, like a plant name tag, because it's flexible plastic, and just take that and gently peel off the outside layer, just the thin layer of the corm, and that will enable the corm to root faster. This is just because that outer layer really does nothing anatomically for the corm. Once you're trying to get it to root, it's just a protective outer layer, and the roots won't have to push through that layer when you're trying to get it to root. I've done experiments where I've listened to him and I've peeled the corm with either a credit card or a piece of plastic or my fingernails, but it's much easier with the plant tag. And then I've done another half where I don't peel it, and the ones that I peel root in half the time. So as long as the card is clean and your corms are clean, there's no harm in peeling the corm.
Okay.
And so, so you're not letting it harden off. You're actually opening it up a little bit. So you're going to peel the corm or all your corms, and then you have to choose your method. And you don't have to peel. Some people are very anti-peeling. That's okay. You don't have to. You just have to be okay with waiting longer.
Right.
You're just going to have to wait longer. Okay, so that's just the way it goes. You cannot do it, but you're going to also have to be patient. I'm from the East Coast. I'm not waiting, Right. I don't have all day, so. All right, so then you've got to pick your method. And this is where the corm world is so divided on the right way to plant your corms. And the reason why is because people are afraid of killing corms. It's not, and I just want to get this message out there to people, is that almost every method out there for growing corms works. It's not the method that is wrong. It's the understanding of what corms need that people have wrong, or the understanding of just the process, or understanding that sometimes corms aren't meant to sprout, just like some seeds are bad seeds.
Right. So what do corms need?
First of all, corms need constant moisture.
Okay.
So whatever method you choose, whether you use the puddle method, which means some people like to put their corms from here in a little puddle of water to sprout. Some people like to put their corms, they plant it in fluval stratum. Some people plant their corms in sphagnum moss. Some people plant them in perlite. Some people do a combination, 50-50. My go-to I'm showing here is 50-50 perlite and fluval stratum. I love fluval stratum, but it's very expensive. So I cut it 50/50 with perlite. I love sphagnum moss, but I like how perlite makes air pockets and absorbs some of the water.
Okay.
It makes it airier. So I'll add perlite to the sphagnum moss. So that's just my choice. But I do all of it. I do all these methods, and it almost always works.
The media has to stay consistently moist. That's the most important thing.
Consistently. If you let it dry out, your corm is going to dry out. And once the corm dries out, even at one point, even if it dries out for like a few hours or a day completely, it will shrivel, and that's it. Game over. And that's okay, because the good news is allocate, right, you learn. And it doesn't mean that fluval stratum doesn't work.
It means you didn't hydrate the fluval stratum.
Right. It's so funny. So before this podcast, I went on Facebook to see like what people are really upset about. And there's this one post, people were saying, I just killed a corm in fluval stratum, and that's it. I'm never doing it again. So what other method is out there? Anyway, everybody's different.
So let's move forward, considering I trust you, Lindsay, implicitly. So I want to use the Lindsay method, which is half fluval stratum, half perlite, which is also what we talked about on our last episode. So I have my glass with half fluval, half perlite. Is this the method where I'm putting the bottom third of water and then the top 2/3 are not submerged in water?
Yeah. So again, it's so flexible as long as as long as the perlite and fluval stratum is evenly moist. It doesn't even have to be, I say like 1/3 of water on the bottom, because that will ensure that everything gets evenly moist. Mm-hmm. But this is what I'm showing here is just a plastic
cup. Yeah.
And it's filled 1/3 of the way with a mix of fluval stratum and perlite. And I sprayed water into it. I just made sure that it was completely from top to bottom evenly wet. Now, there is some water on the bottom, like a puddled, and that's okay, because the corms aren't touching the water.
Yeah, so my next question was going to be, how deep do you plant the corms in the media?
Right. So the corms are only sitting on the top, and they're buried just enough so that the tips of the corms are popping out.
Okay, so you put it probably like 50% submerged, so the top tip?
Two-thirds of the way submerged.
Okay. And then what do? We've put it in. It's 2/3 submerged. The media is evenly moist.
Cover it up.
So you're making a little prop box. So
it is 100% humidity.
100% humidity. And how long is it in this 100% humidity scenario?
The whole time.
Right. Or I guess, how long does it take? Let's use
I knew you were going to ask me.
Yeah, let's take an alocasia poly, like the basic alocasias. Like on average, how long does it take corms to sprout?
I knew you were going to ask me this, and so one of my biggest personality flaws is that I am time blind. Like, I don't know if it. Well, here I am on one hand, like, hurry up, I don't have time, and the other hand, I'm like, I have no idea how long something takes. But the reason why I'm especially time blind with plants is because I'm constantly propagating maybe like 50 species of alocasias at once, and they all take different amounts of time to sprout. So I would say the average alocasia is going to take 2 to 4 weeks to sprout, and then you're going to have maybe another month or 2 until you get a leaf or 2 leaves.
Okay.
And this all depends.
This is a slow burn, exciting process. So you're putting it in and you're waiting at least, around a month to see any action, to see a sprout. And then you're still leaving it in that prop box for the first couple of leaves to come and develop.
Right. And it might be only like I said, maybe a couple weeks or 3 weeks to see that little sprout. But the roots are going to start popping in maybe like after 2 weeks. But you can't really see. And I think that's why people do like the puddle method, which is in water, because they can really see the roots.
Right, the roots.
But here's the thing about this puddle. This has gained a lot of popularity, this puddle method, which is you put the plant in you put the corm in a little like cap of water. There's a lot of confusion around it. Do you cover it? Do you leave it open? The water is going to likely grow algae, or it's going to need to be replaced. If the water dries out, your corm is going to dry out. People have to then like refresh their water every few days. If you put it in a cup of fluval and perlite and cover it up, I'm not touching this thing until it has fully developed leaves.
Are you putting it under grow lights?
Yeah, I do have it under grow lights. And it's not because corms do not need light to grow roots, because they grow roots even underground, connected to the mother plant. But the minute they do have sprouts, that green little sprout on top, that starts to photosynthesize, and then it needs light. So I just have a setup where I have it under light. So it's kind of like a set it and forget it setup, which is what I'm all about. Like I am all about that. Like I have 3 children and a bazillion plants. Like I do not have time to, people are talking about like burping. There's this thing now, like burping your containers, like open it up and close. I'm not burping anything. No.
Okay.
I had 3 babies that I burped. Like, no, like my corms.
We're not burping our plants, right?
I am not burping my corms. I mean, good for people if they want to do that. Like, I totally respect anyone who wants to do anything with their plants. Like, I think that was really cute. And like, I love when people baby their plants, because like I am all the plant babies. Like I go for it. Like that's awesome. And especially if that works, go for it. But if there's an easier way, I say go for the easier way. And then you can baby your mother plants. Like take that time and like polish your mother plant's leaves, like do a photo shoot with her, like a boudoir shoot, with the Alocasia poly, I'm just kidding. Okay. That's a little crazy. But you know what I mean? Like spend time where the time's needed. The corms, like they do their own thing in nature. Like no one's going out to the jungle of Borneo and burping those corms. Yeah. Like they're just coming up, they're underground, doing their own thing. Right. So create those same swampy conditions in a container and let them do their thing.
So then it grows a couple of leaves. The leaves are starting to fill out this little plastic cup dome that you have. How do you harden it off and get it out of this 100% humidity environment into the real world, into my living room?
Right. That's a great question. So that's kind of what's happening. For those of you that can't see me, I'll show you. I have this container here, and it's a plastic container with some sphagnum moss, and I have 3 Alocasia aslanii growing in here. They each have 1 leaf, and they have, it's a corm, each with 1 leaf. So the next thing I do, and that's another huge question that I get a lot, is what do I do once they have a leaf or 2? How do I transfer it? So after the corm has 1 leaf, that is, your plant is good enough to transfer at that point to the medium of your choice, like its final destination, because especially if you've been propagating in fluval stratum or moss, because those roots are used to growing in a solid medium. So those roots will easily transfer to an aeroid mix at this point, or lechuza pon or leca, or any medium, because it's used to growing in salt, as opposed to like any kind of water method. If you have been propagating in a puddle method and then you go right to an aeroid mix, those roots will go into shock. I write a little bit about that in my book, but those of you who have propagated a lot know that water right to soil can sometimes shock roots and be sensitive. Right, it can be tricky. Here, you're ready to transfer it. Now, the way you transfer it is simply to pot it up in any medium that you would like, just as you would pot up any normal plant. The issue is that it's been in 100% humidity. Now, depending on where you live, you can either put it right into your living room. If you're living in humid Florida or, humid parts of California along the coast, and your living room is like 60% humidity, that's a little humid for a house, but maybe that's your case. I don't know. Or maybe you're putting it outside in your greenhouse. That's an easy transfer, 100% to 60% humidity. Your Alocasia might not go into shock. However, most people have humidity in their homes that's about like 40%. The average house humidity, 40, 50, 30% even. And that would be a little bit of a shock to a plant. So what I like to do is I like to pot up my alocasias. And since I know I'm transferring them, they're young plants, they're being transferred from 100% humidity. I like to then put them in a propagation box, which is just like a clear holding box
Right.
for a couple weeks after I transfer them, because they're going to be in a little bit of a shock period, switching media. And I feel it out. I feel it out. So I will sometimes lift the lid up halfway to me. So it's hard to do this without showing. So what I'm doing here is I am lifting the lid halfway off of the plastic container, and that makes the humidity in my box, the plastic box that I'm going to be using, maybe a little bit lower than 100%, maybe like 80%. Yeah, to get some airflow in there, and just cracking the humidity box a little bit adjusts my alocasia a little bit at a time. And then by the time, after a couple weeks, I lift it out, I have a lot of like big clear plastic bins, and then I take it out. Is this necessary to do like this slow adjustment to humidity all the time? No. But for your very delicate alocasias, like your Eslanii, absolutely. A chai, you'll never want to do that because chai has to live in 70% humidity to survive. So anyone who grows a chai keeps it in a grow tent anyway. A poly might just adjust because automatically, because they're hardy. So you have to use your judgment.
So what are the biggest mistakes you've seen people make / maybe you've made that you want to warn people who are going to try this for the first time? Sounds like besides don't let the media dry out. That sounds like number one mistake. Don't do it.
So I would say, oh gosh, there's a couple other big mistakes, but one other big mistake is the total opposite of that, which is drowning them in too much moisture.
Okay.
Your choice of media, you want to make sure that it's not too wet. And this is the issue more so with using sphagnum moss, because sphagnum moss can retain a lot of moisture.
Yeah.
And so that's why it gets a bad rap, and a lot of people moved away from it. And again, it's not because there's anything wrong with sphagnum moss. It's an amazing substrate to propagate in. The problem is that people don't know how moist it should be. Should it be sopping wet or should it be dry? And should I let it dry out or not? And people have all these questions, and a lot of times their corms will end up rotting in it because they are not following this cardinal rule, which is always have your sphagnum moss as moist as a wrung out sponge. So it should feel like if you take it and soak it with water and then squeeze all the water out, that's exactly how moist the sphagnum moss should be. And if that is how it is, your corms will thrive in sphagnum moss. It makes an amazing substrate for propagating corms. I mean, it's perfect. It's fluffy. It's filled with air. It retains humidity. You're not going to have to keep moistening it. Put it in a container that's sealed, and the roots will just want to grow out into that. It's like a soft, fluffy pillow. So I would say that's another huge mistake that I made in the beginning, was having this damp, soggy, swamp-like moss, and then not just corms, but any propagation just kind of sitting in this swamp.
Okay. Interesting. You said there were a couple of others that came to mind?
Yeah. Yes. Another was planting the corm upside down.
Okay. Tip Hershey Kiss, tip up.
Yes,
Okay.
Exactly. Yes. Just like you'd place a Hershey Kiss facing up, plant your corm facing up too. The only challenge is that, unlike a Hershey Kiss, corms are not flat on the bottom. They are rounded on the bottom, so it is easy. There are times, especially if you didn't pull any stem off with your corm, sometimes it's really hard to tell which way that stem was coming from. So when you go to plant it, it's really hard to see which way the sprout, the new green sprout, is about to emerge from. The good news is, most of the time, under the right conditions, the corm will still start to grow. So it has happened to me where it does still start to grow eventually, but it takes a long time, and usually it's just roots. And it's not great. It's usually you like opening it up and saying like, what the heck is going on? And then you'll realize your mistake.
I love it. Any other common mistakes you want to warn people about?
I would say the other mistake would be not checking your corm ahead of time to make sure that it is not rotted to begin with. So I see, people potting up corms and saying it was a failure, but I'm wondering if their corm might have been bad to begin with, because people are buying these corms off of Etsy a lot, or importing them from Asia, or God knows where. And then they're going online and saying my corm rotted or my corm wasn't successful. And it leads me to wonder, was the corm healthy to begin with? Especially if you bought it from, a random seller. Sometimes sellers aren't, not all sellers, but some sellers aren't always honest. So
what are the symptoms of an unhealthy corm?
Right. So you'll want to check in the beginning that the corm is plump and not wrinkly. A corm should never, if your corm is wrinkly, that means it's dried out a little bit. So it's begun to pucker in, and it should be very firm, like a rock. If it's mushy at all, the corm has begun to rot. And I suppose it's possible to save a corm by cutting off rot. I mean, anything in the plants are amazing and resilient, so anything's possible. But if I bought a corm and someone sent me a corm that was mushy, I would get a refund. I wouldn't, go ahead and just happily perform surgery on the corm and then plant it. Alocasias produce a lot of corms, and it's definitely not okay to receive one that is mushy, and that's just setting yourself up for failure. So make sure it's plump and doesn't have any wrinkles and is not mushy at all.
Okay, amazing. I'm really excited to try this. This sounds really fun. I have an alocasia that doesn't have any more roots, and I was hoping that I might be able to still root. It's not the core, it's the stem. It's like the swollen base of the stem.
Right.
Do you think I'll be able to regrow the roots if I don't have the leaf? No, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Put that with some fluffy.
I put it in leca.
Sphagnum. That's possible. Leca might work. I typically use sphagnum moss and perlite mix for that.
Okay. It was such a beautiful alocasia, and when I moved a year ago, it just, some plants just didn't make it, but it kind of died a slow death. We'll see. We'll see if we can resuscitate. But I'm excited to get a new alocasia to try this method.
Definitely.
Also, I haven't, my Alocasia cuprea. I wonder if I could try it on my Alocasia cuprea. Have you done that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to try that. So your book has a lot of support if people want to try from form, propagating from seed, anthurium, alocasia, whatever. If you want to propagate, you got to check out Lindsay's book. So tell us everything about where everyone can find you and where everyone can find your book.
Oh my gosh. Well, you could find me in Illinois outside Chicago. No, you could find my book. You can find my book online, anywhere where books are sold, Amazon.com, on my website, www.alltheplantbabies.com. I mean, any search for All the Plant Babies on the internet will bring up my website, my Instagram, my TikTok, my YouTube. I'm everywhere.
You're everywhere, baby. Yeah.
I'm all over the place. All the Plant Babies everywhere, and it's really not hard to reach me in any one of those places. I'm probably on Instagram the most of all those places, so check out my Instagram highlights. I've got information on planting alocasias on there, and then I just wrote a blog article on my website, alltheplantbabies.com, last night about, it's called Why Did My Alocasia Corm Die? So it's all about, it's 7 reasons why. If your Alocasia Corm died during propagation, it's 7 reasons why. So it's a lot about what we spoke about here.
We'll link to it in the show notes.
Yeah, awesome. Perfect.
Okay,
perfect.
Cool. All right. And of course, all of your social channels and your book will be linked in the show notes as well. You are always such a delight to have. And we're just going to work through each chapter of your book in podcast episodes, I feel like. Thank you so much for coming on again and sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you for having me, Maria. You're awesome.
Growing joy.